The blood moon descends, and the whole world begins to warp. Supplies in place, the full-scale fortress conversion begins. I awaken the doomsday piecework system. My whole family goes on a frantic stockpiling spree, grinding this rundown shack into a fortified stronghold. Others slaughter each other in the mist over half a cracker. But my family lounges in our underground greenhouse, growing vegetables. Eating steaming beef hot pot while guns roast the kitchen raiders. You want to rob us? A mechanical behemoth comes to break down the door. Sorry about that. One tap on the system to upgrade. High-voltage electric fence. Heavy machine gun turrets rise inside the house. A metal storm unleashes full firepower in an instant. For half a month straight, every day held a single dusk. The sky looked as if someone had splashed blood across it, glowing a dark, spine-chilling shade of crimson. The news reported it every single day. Affected by an unknown magnetic field, red aurora phenomena appeared across the globe. Experts swore up and down that it was nothing, telling citizens not to panic. But I knew. Something was very, very wrong. The first to sense the danger was my husky, Big Genius. Normally he's a carefree fool, wagging his tail off the moment you give him a snack. But these past few days, he wouldn't even touch his favorite big bone. Right now Big Genius was staring dead at the living room. At that rattling, broken wooden window. His fur bristling all over, letting out fearful whimpers at the blood-red night sky. An animal's instincts are often sharper than a human's. I followed his gaze. A gust of cold wind was pouring in through the long-neglected window cracks, sending a sudden shiver down my spine. To find inspiration for my writing, I'd rented this cheap old suburban bungalow. Not only were the courtyard walls absurdly low, it also leaked drafts from everywhere. In weather this eerie and sinister, there was simply no sense of security at all. The dog's whining made my skin crawl even more. I sighed and just grabbed a hammer and a few rusty iron nails, walking over to the window, planning to nail this broken frame shut for good. However, the very instant I swung the hammer at the nail, a dark red bolt of lightning flashed outside the window. My hand jerked. The hammer veered off course, and the sharp nail sliced open my palm. Blood came pouring out. Drip, 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 falling onto the mottled cement floor. I was about to grab the first aid kit when something bizarre happened. The mottled cement floor seemed to come alive, instantly drinking up every drop of the fallen blood. And then, a mechanical voice boomed deep inside my mind. Gene sequence confirmed. Blood drop binding successful. The doomsday infrastructure system is now bound. Clutching my bleeding hand, I froze in place. A holographic panel glowing with faint blue light hovered out of thin air right before my eyes. Red alert. Only 7 days remain until the blood moon mist descends. At that time, all life on Earth will undergo irreversible mutation, turning into blood-craving monsters. Host, please establish your defenses immediately. Build against the blood moon and the mist monsters. I stared hard at that 7-day countdown, feeling a chill shoot from my soul straight to the crown of my head. Without any hesitation, I pulled out my phone and called my dad. Dad, bring Mom and Xiaoche to the house I'm renting. It's a matter of life and death, don't waste a single second. An hour later, an old, beat-up Santana screeched to a halt outside the courtyard. Mom and Dad dragged in my little brother Xiaoche, still in his pajamas, his face full of confusion. Sis, what on earth is going on in the middle of the night? I was about to go to bed. I took a deep breath and looked at them with a grave expression. Mom, Dad, Xiaoche, what I'm about to say, you might find utterly unbelievable, but you have to trust me. In the simplest words I could, I explained the system binding, and the apocalypse coming in 7 days. The air fell into a brief, deathly silence. Even though that faint blue glowing system panel could only be seen by me, watching my tense, serious expression, and thinking back on the dark red skies of the past half month, and the bizarre news, they clearly realized I was absolutely not joking. Dad broke the silence first. He asked earnestly, "Since you've obtained this system, then tell us, what should we do now?" "Yeah, sis, this house couldn't even keep out a hooligan, let alone defend against monsters. We've got to have a plan." Xiaoqie grew tense too. In the dim light, Mom gripped my hand tightly. My whole family chose to trust me unconditionally. I nodded and focused my mind to open the system panel. The panel flickered once and popped up a new task. Beginner task triggered, supply reserves. Task requirement, within 7 days. Complete the base's basic supply reserves. Task reward, upgrade the current base to Tier 1 armored villa form. The system just issued a task. As long as we finish the stockpiling task within 7 days, it can upgrade this house. From now on, we must spare no cost. To stockpile, understood? Since we need to stockpile in bulk, we need money. A staggering amount of money. Honey, how much of our savings can we still touch? Pull out all the fixed term deposits, everything. All told, we still have 2 million. Not enough, nowhere near enough. Buying food, buying medicine, buying self-defense gear. This is definitely a bottomless pit. With that, Dad pulled out his phone and decisively called a black market agent. "Hello, old Lou, that school district department on the second ring in the city. You've always wanted to lowball me for it, right? I won't waste words with you. Market price is 5 million. I only want 2.5 million, half off. Just one condition. The full payment must be in my account within 2 hours tonight. Miss it and the deal's off." Mom listened beside him, her heart pounding. That was the most valuable lifeline our family had. But he clenched his teeth and didn't utter a single word of protest, because he knew, if the apocalypse truly came and your life was gone, what use would a house be? Over the next 7 days, our family ran at a frenzied pace like never before, working like a machine. Everyone split up to act, maxing out every online loan platform we could borrow from, and every credit card. Adding the savings and the money from selling the house, in our hands, we astonishingly held nearly 10 million. Mom, who used to haggle over a single cabbage, now had nothing in her eyes but buy. On the morning of the first day, she charged straight to the city's largest agricultural wholesale market, slapped down her bank card, and bought out the entire stock of the 2 biggest grain and oil wholesalers. Vacuum-sealed premium Wuchang rice. Give me 20,000 pounds of high-gluten flour, 10,000 pounds of non-GMO soybean oil, 500 barrels of salt, sugar and soy sauce, top-grade seasonings, load them up. Enough to last 10 years. Mom rattled off to the dumbfounded shop owner in one breath and hired 3 trucks on the spot, hauling it through the night to our little suburban bungalow. Right after that, Mom moved on to the meatpacking plant and large cold storage, buying 100 dressed hogs in one go, 50 skinned and gutted black goats, and a full 2,000 pounds of premium beef and steaks. To hold all this meat, she also went to the second-hand appliance market and swept up 10 commercial-grade chest freezers. Besides fresh food, instant food was the top priority. Mom pulled strings to reach a cannery's direct distributor. Luncheon meat, braised beef cans, canned yellow peaches, braised bamboo shoot cans. She bought a full 2,000 cans of every kind of tin-preserved food, stacking them into a small mountain in the yard. As for water, Mom contacted a bottled water plant and hauled back 1,000 barrels of purified water. She also went to the building materials market and bought 10 2-ton, food-grade, water storage tanks, hooking up hoses and running tap water day and night, until everyone was completely filled. On the 3rd day, Mom's figure appeared at every major chain pharmacy. Cephalosporins, amoxicillin, and other broad-spectrum antibiotics, all kinds of fever reducers, painkillers, stomach medicine, all taken by the case. She knew well that in the apocalypse, medicine is worth its weight in gold. Besides the standard drugs, she also got several sets of professional surgical instruments, large amounts of medical alcohol, iodine, fast-acting bandages, and piles of multivitamins. Even if we went without daylight for a long time, these vitamins could ensure that we wouldn't, from lack of nutrition, fall ill from deficiency. Unlike Mom's 2 supply lines, Dad took the hardcore route of war preparation. He used the connections he'd built back in his construction crew days, the network he'd accumulated, to begin forging the foundation of this soon-to-be upgraded fortress. Dad's first stop was the heavy machinery market outside the city. Ordinary household generators simply couldn't hold up. Dad paid top dollar for 5 diesel generators originally meant to supply hospitals' elite-grade units. Not only that, he also ordered 30 sets of monocrystalline silicon, solar panels, and a whole wall of energy storage battery cabinets. With the machines, he still needed fuel. Fuel, in the end times, was a strategic resource that could serve as hard currency. Dad rented an enclosed box truck. For 3 straight nights, he shuttled back and forth to a large oil refinery, filling a full 50-ton-sized plastic barrels with diesel and 92-octane gasoline. He also took people to the coal transfer station and bought a full 20 tons of smokeless coal, along with 3 sturdy wood-burning stoves. As for Xiao Che, he took on the heavy duty of firepower output. He rushed to the hunting club and paid a high price to buy from several veteran hunters 10 compound crossbows and 5 heavy crossbows. These things pack enormous power. Within 50 meters they can pierce even a wild boar's skull. Xiao Che gestured excitedly. Not only that, he also custom-ordered 5,000 carbon fiber bolts and 1,000 blood-grooved triangular titanium alloy arrowheads. After buying the melee weapons, Xiao Che stormed into the hardware wholesale city. He hauled back 4 industrial, high-pressure gas nail guns. With a little modification, they became lethal close combat weapons. Besides that, heavy steel splitting axes, long-handled tactical shovels, riot stab-proof suits, Kevlar stab-proof vests, military tactical boots, and high-power strobe flashlights were carried into the courtyard one by one. Xiao Che nearly armed us to the teeth with every close combat and defensive gear he could think of, and as the family's chief coordinator, besides staying in the bungalow, signing for deliveries day and night, for all these mountains of supplies, I was also in charge of filling gaps and the system-related covert preparations. Through same-city couriers and premium delivery, I bought 4 top-tier reverse osmosis water purifiers, hundreds of large-capacity filter kettles, and even managed to get 2 night vision devices with thermal imaging, and several ultra-long endurance reconnaissance drones. In the bedroom, intelligence and vision are half the victory. And of course, I didn't forget Big Genius either. I combed through the city's largest pet wholesale market and bought a full 300 bags of premium dog food, dozens of cases of staple freeze-dried meat and antibiotics for pets, on a sudden whim. I even had several steel-wired neck guards custom-made for him, along with full protective suits. Time slipped by at a frantic pace. Amid the hauling, organizing, and stacking, by the night of the 6th day, this shabby little bungalow we'd rented, together with the once-empty yard, was already loaded with over 1,000 tons of supplies, crammed so full there wasn't even room for a footstep. Every bit of it was tightly covered by Dad, with thick tarps. The neighbors all around, watching big trucks roll in and out of our place every single day, thought we'd lost our minds. Hey, old Lin, hauling in all this stuff. Is your family planning to open a giant supermarket? My dad just kept a cold face and locked the courtyard gate, not bothering to answer at all. Until the red moon apocalypse fully descended. Only the final hour remained. The entire sky was no longer a dim red, but a thick, suffocating blood color. The last case of lunch and meat, quick. Get it inside, Dad shouted. And together with Xiao Che, they heaved up the crate weighing dozens of pounds, and rushed into the bungalow. The moment the 3 old wooden doors slammed shut, 3 bolts were driven home. The whole family slumped against the piles of supplies, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath in great heaving gulps, and right as that final case of lunch and meat hit the ground, the system panel before my eyes suddenly let out a crisp chime. The supply reserve progress bar at the panel center blazed with light, jumping from 99.9% to 100%. And then, a string of mechanical voices abruptly echoed in my mind. Basic supply reserves detected at 100% completion. Beginner main quest, supply reserve, perfectly accomplished. Rewards being distributed. As the system prompt faded, a violent earthquake erupted in an instant, but the epicenter was confined solely to our family's plot of land. Under the utterly stunned gazes of Mom, Dad, and Xiao Che, a ball of blinding white light completely swallowed the rundown little bungalow. I could clearly hear brick and stone shattering, rebar reassembling, and the tremendous roar of cement setting. It was the bungalow, being reconstructed under the system's power. About a minute later, the white light dispersed. All four of us stood frozen in place. The dilapidated, drafty little bungalow was gone. In its place stood a 300 square meter, two-story fortress villa armed to the teeth. The broken wooden windows with gaps in the panels had become bulletproof glass several centimeters thick. The gate was recast into a pure steel blast door, with a hydraulic locking system. I pressed against the first floor's brand new bulletproof window and looked outside. The crumbling brick wall that once reached only thigh-high had now risen straight up from the ground, transformed into a towering 3-meter, smooth-surfaced, impossible to climb, heavy anti-crash wall. Our whole family, as if in a dream, wandered around this newborn fortress, taking it all in. In the spacious first-floor living room, the worn fabric couch had become a full leather sectional. The smart motion-sensing lights overhead lit up one by one as we moved, casting a soft, bright glow. Not only that, the climate control system in the corner ran silently, holding the room at a precise, most comfortable 24 degrees, completely sealing out the increasingly cold, grim air outside. Following the brand new anti-slip stairs up to the second floor, the several once decaying, leaking rooms were now utterly transformed anew. The walls were uniformly clad in a deeply reassuring layer of metal armor. Every bedroom was fitted with a temperature-regulated large bed and an independent air purification, circulation port. In the corridor, there was even an added, fully enclosed tactical observation deck. The massive one-way bulletproof glass not only gave an unobstructed view of the surrounding streets, but below the glass was cleverly built a row of covered firing ports, perfectly blending daily life with defense. Just as we were still immersed in the shock of the fortress's completion, the system's mechanical voice delivered its final decree in my mind. Tier 1 armored villa deployment complete. May you and your family live long in the apocalypse. As the mechanical voice slowly faded, the surroundings fell into a brief, envied silence, but this piece couldn't hold out even a single minute. A shrill, ghastly howl erupted abruptly from the street outside the villa. Big Genius, who'd been scampering all over the new house, heard that howl and shuddered head to tail in terror, then shot straight under the sofa and absolutely refused to come out. As night fell, the endless darkness didn't arrive as expected. What surged in instead was a sky-blotting blood-red fog. It was like living, venomous snakes, following the streets, the sewers, the cracks in doors, leaving no gap untouched, seeping into every corner of the city, every last one. I stood at the huge bulletproof window on the second floor, looking down at the world beyond the wall. That feeling was like sitting in a safe first-class cabin, watching helplessly as the plane plunged into a bottomless abyss. Beside me came a sudden crash. The glass cup in Xiao Chei's hand smashed hard onto the floor, shattering to pieces. He looked as if struck by lightning, frozen in place, staring fixedly at the street diagonally across. The next second, as if he'd seen some horrifying scene, a trembling finger pointed into the depths of the thick fog, his voice cracking completely with fear. What the hell is that thing? I looked in the direction he pointed, and my stomach instantly churned. The owner of the auto repair shop diagonally across, on screen, a kindly uncle who smiled at everyone he met, was now wrapped in that red fog, kneeling on the ground in agony, both hands clenched tight around his own throat, clawing the flesh of his neck to shreds, dark red blood streaming down through his fingers. After just a few seconds of convulsing, he snapped his head up. What kind of face was that? The muscles completely contorted, his eyes bloodshot to the extreme. He'd transformed into what the system called a mindless frenzied one. Just then, the shop owner's wife rushed out of the back room with a basin of water. Seeing her husband on the ground, she screamed in terror and ran to help him up. Xiao Chei let out an anxious shout, but there was no way to be heard outside. The frenzied repair shop owner let out a beast-like howl, and violently tackled his wife to the ground. This was only the beginning. As the fog spread, the whole block, and indeed the entire city, instantly plunged into a brutal, one-sided slaughter. On the highway not far off, several private cars that were speeding to escape the frenzied ones slammed into one another in a chain collision, triggering a violent explosion. Flames shot skyward, reddening half the heavens. The streets were full of survivors running for their lives. And behind them were the four-limbed, terrifyingly fast frenzied ones. Screams, car alarms, the crackle of fires, and that scalp-tingling, howling shriek wove together into a symphony of despair. Xiaoqie couldn't hold it in any longer. He turned away, covered his mouth, and began to dry heave. After all, he was only a 19-year-old student. Where would he ever have seen such a hellish sight? Mom's face was pale as paper too. She clutched Dad's arm tightly, trembling uncontrollably all over. Don't look. Draw all the curtains. As the heavy blackout curtains were pulled shut, that bloody, hellish scene outside was completely sealed away. Dad turned around and looked at us, weighing every word. All right. From this moment on, the world outside is completely finished. No matter who's knocking at the gate. Even a familiar face we played cards with every day. Or a child crying and screaming for help. No one opens the door. If anyone goes soft, they're gambling with the whole family's lives. Understood? Got it. I'll never drag anyone down. I know all too well how cruel the apocalypse is. Once people are driven by hunger and fear, they become 100 times more terrifying than the frenzied ones outside. Don't worry, Dad. If anyone dares try to steal our things, my nail gun will be the first to say no. That's the kind of kid I raised. All right, don't just stand around. I'll go bring out the food. Come hell or high water. Mom drew a deep breath, forcing down the fear in her heart, and turned to walk into that spacious, modern kitchen. Half an hour later, in the dining room on the fortress's first floor, a warm fireplace was lit. In this city where the power grid had already begun to collapse, our home, relying on the kitchen power system installed by day, was still brightly lit. Mom brought out a big pot of braised pork ribs stewed until tender, steaming hot white rice, and a plate of stir-fried vegetables. The air was thick with the rich aroma of meat and seasoning. Big Genius finally crawled out from under the sofa now. Emerging at last, he seemed to have realized this new home was extraordinarily sturdy, that those monsters' cries couldn't get through it all. So he went right back to his carefree self. Crouching beside the table, gnawing hard on the meaty bone Mom tossed him, his tail wagging like a propeller. As I gnawed on a rib, I pulled up the system panel in my mind. The initial upgrade was complete, but that was by no means the point. On the system panel, the fortress's attribute status had already appeared. I looked at the panel and narrowed my eyes slightly. Right now, the frenzied ones outside are only the most primitive form. They don't know how to use tools. This 3-meter wall and heavy blast door are more than enough to keep them out. But what I truly worry about is people. When the neighbor's food runs out, when they discover that our rundown little bungalow has somehow turned into a brightly lit fortress, human greed and madness will pounce like starving wolves. Mom, Dad, Xiaoqie. After dinner, let's assemble the crossbows and nail guns we bought. Starting tomorrow, the second floor firing blind spots must be watched in shifts around the clock. Yeah. Anyone who dares climb the wall gets treated as a monster. No survivors. Outside the window, the red moon shone like snow. In this catastrophe of humankind, our family's lone island in the apocalypse had only just begun to bear its fangs. The first 2 days of the apocalypse, we spent in a suffocating tension that never let up. The screams outside gradually grew sparse, replaced by the ever more frequent beast-like howls and the teeth-grating sound of claws scraping against the asphalt road. By the third day of the apocalypse, the city's infrastructure had utterly collapsed. Not another drop could be squeezed from the water pipes. The whole district was completely cut off from power. Seen from high above, this once bustling city was now a dead silent, pitch-black ruin. Only the occasional flicker of flames lit up the thick, rolling fog. The temperature also began to plunge. This extreme, waterless and powerless environment, for the survivors hiding in ordinary homes, was without a doubt a catastrophe, but that most certainly did not include us. Over these 3 days, Xiaoqie put me through intensive crossbow training. My arm strength isn't great, so he picked out for me a small, compound crossbow with a labor-saving pulley system. I can't claim to hit a willow leaf at 100 paces, but within 10 meters, driving a diamond-tipped bolt into a target the size of a watermelon, I can already do with near certain accuracy. Early morning, I took a good, long hot shower in the bathroom. As I dried my hair and came downstairs, the kitchen was already wafting with the smell of fried eggs and century egg and pork congee. Suddenly, over by the fireplace, Big Genius, who'd been gnawing a slipper, shot to his feet. His eyes, once a clear blue with a hint of foolishness, narrowed in an instant into sharp, alert slits. The fur all over his body bristled like a hedgehog. He backed up, facing the villa's front door, and let out a frantic barking. Dad's hand, holding a teacup, froze. His gaze turned sharp in an instant. Dad lowered his voice and strode quickly to the living room monitors. There were quite a few, though the outside network was down. The closed-circuit surveillance system we installed before renovating the house was still kept running by the villa's independent local network and its own power system. On the screen, behind the crumbling earthen wall of the neighboring yard, 5 or 6 men crept in, sneaking closer. I recognized these men. They were the local thugs who usually hung around this suburban fringe of the city. The blonde-haired leader still reeked of stale alcohol. When the apocalypse broke out, they happened to be gathered together, drinking. Relying on their numbers, they managed to hack a few low-level frenzied ones to death and hold up in a self-built house. But 3 days had passed. The little bit of drinking snacks they'd stored was probably long gone by now. Brother Long, you sure there's food in there? How'd this house get so damn creepy? Wasn't it just a bungalow before? Who the hell knows what's going on? That day I saw with my own eyes this family hauling several truckloads of stuff back home, and these walls are built so thick, there's definitely good stuff inside. Damn it. I can smell their pork rib soup. I remember they've got a big dog too. Grab the supplies and we'll kill that mutt for drinks too. Though Big Genius, hiding inside, couldn't understand human speech, he seemed to sense a certain intense malice aimed right at him, and barked even more fiercely. I quickly patted his furry head and pressed him down to the floor, signaling him to keep quiet and go fetch the ladder. Kill the men, and let the brothers have their fun with the women. Listening to the filthy words coming through the monitor, Mom's face went pale with rage, while Xiaoqie and I felt a wave of nausea. This was the disregard people showed once freed from the law. Human evil is 100 times more disgusting than the monsters outside. Dad wasted no words. He simply drew an 80-pound heavy compound crossbow. Pulling the string all the way back, a bolt tip fitted with a blood groove glinted with a bloodthirsty gleam under the lights. Xiaoqie, take the nail gun. Get ready at the second-floor firing port. Since they've delivered themselves to our door, then let's grant their wish. Right at that moment, we detected a substantial threat to the territory. Survival mission activated, defense kill. Kill or repel 50 hostile targets. Assaulting the fortress. Current progress, 0/50. We hurried upstairs. On the villa's second-floor bulletproof glass, facing the courtyard wall, there were several concealed firing ports designed by the system. Opening the cover plate allowed a crossbow bolt or gun barrel to poke through, perfectly guaranteeing the defender's absolute safety. Clang. Outside the courtyard wall came the sound of a metal ladder being propped against the brick wall. Then that blonde-haired man, a machete clenched in his teeth, climbed up the ladder using both hands and feet. The moment his head just cleared the 3-meter wall, and he saw the structure in the yard, a 2-story blast-proof villa. Like a military fortress, he was completely dumbstruck. Holy crap, what the hell is this thing? The blonde man's eyes bulged wide, but he never got the chance to find out. So, a short, crisp whistle of splitting air rang out in the courtyard. Dad, through the firing port, with the heavy compound crossbow in his hands, instantly unleashed 80 pounds of draw force, granting that diamond-tipped bolt an utterly terrifying kinetic energy. At a distance of less than 20 meters, the bolt was like a bolt of black lightning, punching clean through the right side of the blonde man's chest. With a whoosh, the bolt carried immense force, sending the blonde man's body flying backward. The few thugs still holding the ladder below were instantly scared out of their wits. That scrawny one just instinctively poked half his head out to look at the situation. Humph. The heavy nail gun in Xiaoqie's hands spat out a burst of white high-pressure gas. A 7-centimeter steel nail, at extremely close range, precisely drilled through the scrawny man's right ear. punching out the back of it. The scrawny man let out a shriek, and like a torn sack, toppled straight down off the ladder. In just 2 seconds, 2 of the thugs lay wounded on the ground. The remaining few dropped their machetes in terror. And howling like wailing ghosts, they fled toward the other end of the street, running for their lives. However, in this apocalyptic city that had been dead silent for 3 days, the blond man's piercing, agonized screams, and the blood flowing from the 2 of them, were no different from dropping a bloody bomb into a deep sea full of sharks. A chilling, hair-raising sound came from doorways all around the street. Those frenzied ones that had been wandering about, and even the evolved monsters hidden in the shadows, caught this fresh, thick scent of flesh and blood, and came surging out madly from every corner. Looking at the monitor, I drew a sharp breath. A dozen, 20 of them. A full 60 or 70, in ragged clothes. Their bodies covered in lumpy growths. Eyeballs bulging out, the monsters howled, and lunged at the blond man and his crony outside the wall. That blond man was still struggling on the ground, trying to pull the bolt out. The next second, a dozen gray hands with long fingernails pinned him down hard. Help! Amid the sound of flesh tearing and chewing, the blond man's voice cut off abruptly. In a mere 10 seconds, he and the scrawny man were torn to shreds by those frenzied monsters. Even their bones were chewed up and swallowed. And after devouring that scrap of meat, barely enough to fill a gap between teeth, that pack of monsters, still unsatisfied, followed the faint scent of humans in the air, and fixed those dozens of blood-red eyes firmly on the courtyard wall of our fortress. Bang, bang, bang. Clatter. Dozens of monsters began piling on top of each other like a human pyramid, clawing and thrashing madly, slamming against our 3-meter-high courtyard wall and gate. Their claws scraped against the metal with a teeth-grating, ear-splitting screech. The heavy wall, under the impact of dozens of monsters, actually gave off a dull, deep tremor. They want to get in. Dad dumped a whole batch of bolts clattering onto the firing position. A cold killing intent flickered in his eyes. And then, Xiao Che. It's our turn to strike back. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to calm down, and knocked a bolt onto a light compound crossbow, pushing open a firing port cover on the 2nd floor. Below my field of view, densely packed, were nothing but writhing heads and gaping, bloody maws. I wasn't affected by their horrifying appearance. In my crosshairs, they were just numbers ticking on the system panel. So I pulled the trigger and watched it strike one monster's temple with pinpoint accuracy. That monster fell flat on its back and never got up again. Mission progress, 2, 3. The system's prompt tone was the best stimulant for the next 2 full hours. The villa's 2nd floor became a cold, merciless monster slaughterhouse. Dad's heavy compound crossbow almost achieved 1 kill per shot. Mom didn't wield a weapon, but she became the most perfect support, nimbly reloading the strings for us from behind, handing over ammo, refilling the nail gun canisters, and ready at all times to serve up freshly poured Red Bull. Big Genius, meanwhile, ran excitedly back and forth in the 1st floor living room, barking triumphantly at the monsters outside the door, who could only take the beating, as if he were the main MVP of this defensive battle. Our arms gradually ached from drawing the strings, but our eyes grew ever brighter when the last diamond bolt was loosed from Dad's crossbow. At the same moment, the mechanical chime I'd anticipated all night arrived right on schedule, officially issuing the 1st stage upgrade reward. Chen Che, the mission is complete. Prepare to upgrade. Warning, decelerate. Overhead module activating. As the countdown in my mind ended, countless watts erupted in an intense low-frequency resonance, even through the thick bulletproof glass. We could feel the ground beneath our feet trembling faintly. Big Genius skillfully slid on his knees deep under the sofa, with only his 2 blue eyes showing. Drifting fearfully outward, I ran up to the reinforced glass on the 1st floor and drew a sharp breath. Under the interference of the system's pseudo-force, the entire villa's outer walls, that 3-meter-high courtyard wall, including that solid steel gate, their surfaces all began flowing violently like wet cement. The original brick and concrete structure was forcibly shattered at the microscopic level, then reassembled and fused, the molecular strength soaring wildly by geometric multiples. After a mere dozen or so seconds, when the resonance stopped, a suffocating metal fortress appeared before our eyes. The original gray outer walls had vanished, replaced instead by a layer wrapping the entire courtyard. Black diamond armor coating the wall's surface. This kind of armor plating, its surface, had a texture like matte blast-proof paint. Cold and heavy. Each armor plate fit seamlessly against the next, leaving not a single blind spot. Even more astonishing, that courtyard gate had now almost completely transformed into something like a bank, vault door, a hydraulic gear alloy door. Right at that moment, a few stray monsters, drawn back over by the commotion on this side, stumbled and lunged at our armored outer wall. As always, they used their mutated, knife-sharp fingernails to claw madly at it. Crack. A crisp snapping sound rang out. That monster's fingernails not only failed to leave the slightest scratch on the wall's armor, but because it clawed too hard, the nails snapped clean off at the root on the spot, making it howl in agonizing pain. This defensive power is invincible. Now even if the people outside brought a chainsaw, they probably couldn't scrape off a single layer of our outer wall. Dad let out a long breath and was about to speak when the living room floor suddenly gave off a faint mechanical meshing sound. Click. In the center of the wooden floor beneath our feet, two floorboards slowly retracted to either side. An underground passage entrance, glowing with white light, appeared out of thin air. The passage led down in a series of anti-slip alloy stairs. "Ah, is this the thing you mentioned?" Mom's voice was trembling. 4. A Chinese person with farming genes carved into their very bones. There's nothing more exciting than having a vegetable plot right in the bedroom. I swallowed, turned on my flashlight, and led the way down the alloy stairs. Big Genius seemed to catch the smell of soil, wagging his tail, and darted down ahead of us in a flash. When we'd finished the dozen or so steps, and saw the sight before us clearly, everyone, including the ever-steady Dad, was utterly stunned into stillness. This was no mere basement. This was practically a small underground oasis system. Beneath what had once been a bungalow with only a shallow foundation, they'd carved out a full, sprawling, a vast domed space of 500 square meters. The walls here were entirely sealed with leak-proof polymer material, without any dark or damp feeling at all. Instead, it was filled with a fresh, faintly sweet fragrance of earth. Looking up, above the underground dome, hung neat rows of full-spectrum, solar-powered heat lamps. This kind of lighting could not only perfectly simulate the sun's rays, but also provide the precise temperature plants need to grow. On the ground, a dozen or so long, orderly divided, strip-shaped soil-free cultivation troughs, filled with dark brown, extremely nutrient-rich growing medium. In the corner stood a full set of fully automatic nutrient solution circulation and filtration system, giving off a faint sound of flowing water. In this world full of monsters, severed arms and a cold indifference of rotting stench, this 500 square meter warm oasis was like the only faint glimmer in the darkness, giving people hope to keep living. Oh my God. He ran up to the nearest cultivation trough and scooped up a handful of dark brown soil in both hands, his eyes brimming with excited tears. Little Chow was so thrilled he didn't know what to say. He ran to the circulation water tank in the corner, turned on the faucet, and clean water came gushing out. Big Genius was excited beyond measure. In this enormous underground space, he dashed back and forth, and finally rolled around in an empty trough in one corner, sprawled out spread eagle inside it. Clearly, he'd already claimed this as his own royal doghouse. Mom immediately ran back to the storeroom upstairs and carried down a large cardboard box. Those were what we'd bought before the apocalypse arrived. Dozens of packets of vegetable seeds. She carefully tore them open. A pack of bok choy, a pack of tomato seeds, and one by one, buried them into that black growing medium. Mom muttered to herself as she planted, wearing the most heartfelt smile since the end of the world began. I watched Mom planting the crops, Dad tinkering with the water circulation system, and little Che fighting the dog over territory. And the huge weight in my heart finally settled completely. The fog outside was still thick. The monsters still roamed, but beneath our feet, the seeds of life were wrapped in this steel armor, taking root and sprouting, with this fortress, with this underground greenhouse. Even if the world outside were utterly destroyed, our family could still, in this hell of despair, guard our endlessly living green hope, and survive to the very end. Time had lost its original scale in the apocalypse. In the blink of an eye, a month and a half had passed since doomsday fell. In this month and a half, the city had died completely. The once bustling streets were filled with abandoned cars and layer upon layer of piled-up white bones. The most deadly thing was not just the frenzied ones roaming in the fog, but also extreme hunger. Nearly all the food in the entire city had vanished. Supermarkets and convenience stores had long been looted clean by survivors. Even the rats in the sewers had all been caught and eaten clean, but inside our fortress villa, the scene was completely different. From the underground ecological greenhouse came Mom's hearty, full-throated voice, wearing my loungewear. I walked down the stairs in slippers. Before me lay a comforting expanse of lush green. Under the full-spectrum heat lamps, those rows upon rows of cold-resistant bok choy in the soil-free troughs grew crisp and glistening, even fresher and more tender than what the supermarkets sold before doomsday. At noon Mom used the first batch of bok choy to cook a pot of steaming pork meatball soup. The four of us sat in the living room kept at a constant 26 degrees, sipping the delicious vegetable soup, watching the gray, lifeless, apocalyptic ruins beyond the bulletproof glass. That sense of security simply couldn't be put into words. Rumble. Just as we set down our bowls and chopsticks, the muffled roar of an engine suddenly shattered the deathly silence around us. Even the water cups on the ground rippled faintly. Dad instantly went into combat mode, set down his bowl, and strode to the surveillance display in the living room. Little Che and I also immediately grabbed the compound crossbows off the wall and the nail gun on the surveillance screen. The red fog was forcibly torn open. A pitch-black, enormous heavy-duty dump truck was roaring toward our suburban neighborhood. This was definitely no ordinary truck. Its front end had been forcibly welded with thick blast-proof steel plates. Right at the front of the truck, they'd even modified it with a sledgehammer-like, triangular ramming spike covered in barbs, with shreds of flesh hanging from it, whether human or monster, torn limbs, and rotting meat, making it look utterly savage. And that's not all. Behind the truck followed two modified off-road vehicles. A dozen or so figures swayed inside them, most holding machetes and steel pipes, and even a few crude homemade shotguns. The thugs from the South City Farmers Market. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. Over the past month and more, through our drone, we'd seen the vicious things this gang did. Relying on ruthlessness and sheer numbers, they robbed survivors of their supplies, and even treated living people like livestock. They were demons through and through. The truck rumbled and stopped at the intersection by our villa. A bald man with a scar on his face, wearing a leather jacket, jumped down from the passenger seat. He looked at our building, entirely covered in diamond armor, and not only wasn't afraid, but his eyes burst with greedy light. Boss, it's this one. This dump used to be a bungalow for sure. Now it's turned into this turtle shell thing. There's definitely big loot inside. A henchman crept up fawningly. Scarface spat on the ground and sneered coldly. Turtle shell? This modified heavy truck of mine can smash through even a bank's thick walls. Armor, huh? People inside, listen up. If you're smart, open the door. Hand over all your food and women. If I'm in a good mood, I'll give you a quick death. Otherwise, when I smash the door open. Inside the house, we listened to the arrogant shouting from the loudspeaker, with no expression at all, like watching a few dead men. The mechanical systems chime rang out in my mind in real time. Ding. Armed threat to territory detected. Triggering defense mission. Territorial dignity. Mission requirement, eliminate all invading thugs. Defend the dignity of the territory. Mission reward, unlock basic firepower weapon module. Firepower weapon module. My eyes lit up instantly. The earlier melee weapon defense was satisfying, but against ever-growing numbers of enemies, it was getting a bit strained after all. The system's reward was like a pillow handed to a sleepy man. Meanwhile, outside the villa, seeing no resistance from the people inside, Scarface cursed, "Damn it. You won't drink a toast, so drink the forfeit. Ram it. Smash that piece of junk iron door open for me." The modified truck spewed out a cloud of black smoke. The tire screeched on the asphalt with an ear-splitting shriek. At nearly 60 miles per hour, a charging steel behemoth rammed straight toward our alloy gate. Whoa. An earth-shaking crash. As if two iron mountains had collided. A deafening screech of twisting metal echoed throughout the whole neighborhood, but the expected scene of the gate being smashed away didn't happen. On the surveillance screen, that menacing heavy truck's ramming spike, the instant it touched the hydraulic alloy door, was like a block of tofu hitting a diamond. The alloy gate produced by the villa system didn't even have the slightest dent. It just let out a dull, muffled boom. By contrast, the heavy truck, with the immense reactive force, had its entire front end instantly deformed, crushed and crumpled inward. The hood was blown clean off. The engine belched thick black smoke and flames. That thug driving the truck didn't even have time to scream. Right there in the twisted cab, he was crushed into a pulp. Scarface and the rest of the thugs were dumbstruck. Staring at the crumpled, wrecked truck, Scarface, in a fit of fury, pulled out a crude homemade shotgun and blasted a shot at the gate. Aside from leaving a scorch mark on the armor plate, it did nothing at all. Scarface completely lost his mind, commanding his dozen or so henchmen, grabbing rope-tipped grappling hooks and steel pipe ladders. Even if we can't get through the door, this wall's only a few meters high. I don't believe there's no vent in this wall. Swinging their grappling hooks, climb over and hack them all to pieces. I watched on the surveillance, that swarm of thugs crawling up the wall like ants, and sneered coldly, reached out my finger, and pressed, on the panel, that brand new high-voltage electricity button, ZZZT. Only a scalp-tingling surge of electric current could be heard across the outer armor of the entire villa. A dazzling layer instantly coursed, like blue snake tongues of high-voltage arcs. The three thugs who'd first climbed onto the wall top. Their hands had just landed on the armor plate, when 100,000 volts of high-voltage electricity instantly pierced through their bodies, and they fell straight off the wall, rigid as boards. The thugs below, about to climb up, were scared out of their wits, threw down their ladders, and scrambled and stumbled toward the off-road vehicles. Trying to run now? The compound crossbow in Dad's hands was like the Reaper calling names. One shot went straight through the thug who'd just climbed into the driver's cab. Little Che, holding the nail gun, took aim at Scarface's back. Facing the cold, merciless killing intent, bearing down from the second floor, their original arrogance vanished in an instant. Someone screamed in a breakdown of panic, and the remaining thugs scrambled and stumbled away, not even bothering to pick up the iron rods dropped by their hands, scattering and fleeing like beaten dogs, quickly vanishing into the thick fog. When those chaotic, panicked footsteps had completely faded away, and silence once again fell all around, the system chime arrived right on time. Defense mission territorial dignity complete. Reward. Calculating. Firepower weapon module unlocked. Now installing firepower for the fortress. The once smooth diamond armor along the outer wall now flipped and shifted like a Rubik's Cube, accompanied by the meshing of metal, emitting a deep blue glow of data streams. The wall tops on all four sides burst open with a roar. For cold, heavy metal mechanical bases slowly rose from the hidden compartments. Within a mere dozen or so seconds, the glowing reassembly was complete for wide caliber, twin-linked units with metal ammo belts. Fully automatic heavy machine gun turrets stood imposingly atop the courtyard walls. The infrared target locking sensors on top of the turrets gave off a humming self-check sound. Startlingly brilliant laser beams instantly pierced the fog, locking onto every blind spot beyond the territory. Little Che, watching that steel killing intent full of violent aesthetics, his eyes shining with excitement. Are these damn close-in defense cannons? So freaking cool. I looked at the surveillance screen, now fully automated. Defensive formation, fortress breach. I let out a long, drawn-out breath, turned to look at my family and smiled. From today on, we'll never have to rely on defense alone again. Half a month after wiping out the armed thugs, an eerie silence fell around the villa. Even those crazed mutants that always used to roam outside the walls, snarling and howling, had vanished somewhere these past few days. The fog grew thicker and thicker. A suffocating, bloody stench hung in the air. Until the end of the third month of the apocalypse, when this oppressive tension finally erupted. That afternoon, Big Brains was lazily sleeping on the heated living room floor. Suddenly, he sprang up off the ground. Scrambling and crawling, he squeezed into the deepest corner under the stairs. trembling all over like a leaf. Mom sensed something was wrong. My heart skipped a beat. An animal's instincts far surpass a human's. For something to make our fearless, afraid of nothing husky this terrified. Whatever was coming from outside was definitely no ordinary thing. Thud, 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 a series of dull, rhythmic, thunderous booms came from the distant street. Like the footsteps of some giant creature. With every step it took, the water glass on the table trembled slightly along with it. Everyone, gear up, head upstairs. Dad snatched up the compound crossbow, his face graver than I'd ever seen it. We rushed to the bulletproof glass on the second floor, when that figure came fully into our view. Little Che and I sucked in a sharp breath at the same time. It was a monster. To be precise, a mutated beast over 3 meters tall. Its body, as massive as a small armored car. It no longer bore any human outline at all. Its whole body was covered in grayish-brown fleshy tumors, and over those muscles was a layer of ghastly white bony armor. Its skull had completely degenerated, leaving only a gaping, blood-red maw, bristling with sharp fangs. With every step it took, the asphalt road was stamped into a crater by its enormous feet. What kind of monster is this? The mutants have evolved. This armored behemoth had clearly, from several streets away, caught the scent of us living humans. It suddenly whipped its head around, the nose on that eyeless face twitching frantically. Then it locked onto the direction of our villa, and let out a deafening roar. The sound waves even scattered the surrounding fog. The behemoth launched its thick, powerful lower limbs. Like a runaway bullet train. It came charging straight at our fortress. A wrecked sedan blocked its path along the way. One sweat of its palm sent the car flying dozens of meters. We can't let it get near the gate. Fire! Dad shouted. He flung open the firing port. The 80-pound compound crossbow, its string drew taut in an instant. The diamond-tipped bolt turned into a blur, streaking dead-on at the beast's chest. Against an ordinary crazed mutant, this bolt would surely have punched clean through it. But the next second, a scene of pure despair unfolded. A crisp clang of metal rang out. That diamond bolt head, carrying immense kinetic energy, when it struck the white bony frame on the beast's chest, didn't sink in even half an inch. It was snapped clean in two by the terrifying recoil. What? Dad's pupils contracted sharply. Even a military-grade bolt can't pierce its defense. Little Che refused to believe it and grabbed the nail gun, firing wildly at the beast. Row after row of high-pressure steel nails that could pierce steel plate slammed into the beast's body. Aside from chipping off a tiny bit of bone dust, it was like tickling it. Conventional cold weapons had utterly failed. In the instant we froze in shock. That 3-meter-tall beast had already crossed the 30-meter distance, and slammed with all its might into our diamond-armored outer wall. Crack, crack, the entire 2-story villa shook violently. Warning. Territory under full-scale attack by a high-grade mutant. Outer armor durability falling. 98%. 95%. Emergency defense mission triggered. Defend the fortress. Destroy the high-grade mutant beast. Mission reward. Currently, the base will upgrade to Tier 2 armed fortress form. I stared hard at the red alerts flashing rapidly on the system panel. My brow furrowed tight. The diamond armor can't take this pounding. Sooner or later it'll fall apart. We have to play our trump card. Fine. If cold weapons are useless, then we go straight to heavy firepower. I gave a great shout, and quickly pulled up the system's control panel, pressing the top authority button on the firepower module. Just as the beast raised its fists, preparing to smash the compound wall once more, As the top authorization was granted, inside the outer armored wall came a huge grinding of meshing mechanical gears along the wall top. The hidden armor shells instantly slid open to both sides. Then, driven by hydraulics, those previously unlocked, for fully automatic turrets mounted atop the courtyard wall, the heavy machine gun turrets, once again revealed their true faces, brimming with violent aesthetics, and the aura of death. The machine gun turret facing the gate. It's too thick. Cold barrels swiftly lowered under motor drive. Angling down, the infrared sensor on top lit up with a piercing red glow. A blood-red laser beam instantly pierced the gate, locking onto the thing below, that was still frantically pounding the wall. At the same time, before the system's holographic console in the center of the living room, rose a set of tactical control console with control grips. Target locked. Fully automatic clearing mode ready. Can switch to manual control mode. I immediately turned to look at Little Che. Little Che, take over the console. Blow it to pieces. The battleborn genes in Little Che's blood ignited in an instant. He strode forward and gripped those two cold metal control levers. Through the holographic scope on the screen, that massive armored behemoth sat right in the dead center of the crosshairs. The beast seemed to sense as well the lethal threat bearing down from atop the wall. It stopped its wall pounding, lifted that hideous face, and let out a roar at the machine gun turret on the wall. Roar, roar, roar. Roar all you want, you damn thing. Little Che's eyes went bloodshot, and he slammed down the fire button on the control lever. Boom, 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 boom. A continuous, deafening mechanical roar erupted atop the outer courtyard wall. Two massive, layered tongues of flame instantly gushed from the twin turret barrels. A terrifying metal storm, formed by large-caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds. The instant that first wave of bullets swept across, that ghastly white bony armor it prided itself on, the one that could deflect diamond bolts, was like playing cards, torn straight into a sky full of fragments. The beast let out an agonized scream. Its huge body, under this terrifying kinetic impact, was actually driven staggering backward again and again. The armor-piercing incendiaries, after punching through the bony armor, detonated deep inside its muscle, in violent explosions and flames. Little Che frantically squeezed the trigger. On the screen, enormous golden shell casings poured like a waterfall from the ejection ports of the guns, clattering onto the courtyard wall with a crisp jingle. After barely 20 seconds of saturating fire, the gunfire stopped. The two red-hot machine gun barrels on the wall trailed wisps of blue smoke in the night wind. On the surveillance feed, on the asphalt road below, where was there any 3-meter-tall beast anymore? There was only a heap of shattered bone reeking of scorched flesh. Before that pure metal storm, no matter how formidable a mutated creature, its only fate was to be blown to ash. Looking at the monster on the screen, now completely devoid of any life signs, Little Che suddenly let go of the holographic console's metal control levers and slumped down onto the sofa. Though his face was full of excitement, his hands were still trembling uncontrollably. It was the come-down after extreme adrenaline. My taut nerves finally relaxed too, and I let out a long breath of stale air. At this point, Big Brains finally crawled out from the corner of the stairs. He glanced at the screen, confirmed that the terrifying creature outside wasn't even scraps anymore, and instantly got cocky. He ran up to the floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass, both paws scratching at the glass, and started barking toward that heap of mangled flesh outside, as if to say, I dare you to come in. Watch my big bro riddle you full of holes. Watching this dumb dog putting on airs it didn't earn, our whole family couldn't help exchanging a glance. That feeling of relief at surviving disaster made us all burst out laughing at once. As the laughter reached its peak, the system prompts that had piled up in my mind erupted all at once like a waterfall. Ding. Emergency defense mission complete. Mission rewards being distributed. Rumble. If you'd say, last time, upgrading from the bungalow to the armored villa, went through a wind-driven reassembly, then the commotion this time was like being hit by a magnitude 8 earthquake. The entire villa let out a deep, muffled roar. Then a powerful sense of weightlessness came over us. We were descending through the bulletproof glass. I watched in shock as the ground floor living room's outside view was bit by bit being replaced by black armor plating and earth. The entire 300 square meter armored villa, under the system's power, like a gigantic metal, was forcibly driving itself deep down into the ground. At the same time, that 3-meter-high armored courtyard wall on the outside began expanding rapidly outward, enclosing all the open ground within dozens of meters. Its height shooting straight up to 5 meters, and atop the wall, sprouted even more, barbed high-voltage electric netting and automated patrol tracks. We descended for a full 10 minutes before the weightlessness finally vanished completely. Tier 2 armed fortress deployment complete. Current structural layout. Surface, radar early warning camouflage zone. Fused with heavy isolation defenses. Underground expanded into a 3-level main body. Level 1, living quarters and central command room. Level 2, high-grade supply storage and ecological greenhouse zone. Level 3, independent power center and automated ammunition production line. As the system prompt ended, the interior of the armored villa we'd known had completely changed its appearance. What now lay before our eyes was no longer any kind of villa at all, but a hardcore, military-style underground steel fortress. The surrounding walls were replaced with cold gleaming special alloy. The air circulation system on the ceiling was silently delivering fresh air rich with negative ions. The most striking of all was that the original living room TV wall had now become a giant holographic screen taking up the whole wall, a tactical radar display on it, with the fortress at its center, sweeping in ring after ring, scanning for any life within a 1-kilometer radius. Life signs. This is incredible. Little Che stared blankly at it all, reaching out to touch the radar screen. It was just like a dream. With the shelter of this armed fortress, plus the hundreds and thousands of tons of supplies we'd stockpiled, our family was completely sealed off from the bloodshed above and terror, while the survivors left outside for half a moldy loaf of bread, slaughtered one another, trembling in the thick fog. Over the coming months, we lived deep in the underground fortress, a life as peaceful and settled as it had been before the apocalypse. In the greenhouse zone on the second underground level, Mom's talent for farming was fully unleashed. In that 500 square meter soilless cultivation area, not only was it packed with tomatoes, baby bok choy and cucumbers, and green beans, she'd even carved out a hydroponic vine zone that produced several big, round watermelons. Even crazier, back when we were first stockpiling, Mom had a sudden inspiration and bought several crates online of fertilized hatching eggs and a row of incubators. Under the constant temperature environment the system provided, and with perfect feed, those dozens of fluffy chicks not only survived, they've now grown into plump, meaty hens. Every day, in the specially soundproofed pens at the greenhouse edge, clucking away and laying eggs, time flew by, and now it was the 6th month after the apocalypse erupted, deep winter. That night, the living room on the first level was brightly lit. The heating cranked up high. Dinner's ready, dinner's ready. Put down whatever you're doing. Mom carried out a divided hot pot base, beaming as she walked out of the open kitchen. On a thick, solid wood round table sat a dazzling spread of ingredients. Fresh green vegetables just picked from the system greenhouse. Crisp, sweet cucumber slices. Stockpiled meat Mom had sliced by hand, thin as cicada wings. Frozen fatty beef rolls. There were springy fresh pork balls, luncheon meat, frozen tofu, and a bubbling hot pot broth. Half rich tomato beef brisket. Half fiery beef tallow red broth. Steam rose up in curling white wisps, carrying an overpowering, mouth-watering aroma. Perfect, this weather calls for hot pot. Dad happily set down the firearm in his hands and his maintenance tools, sat down at the table, and cracked open a cold beer. Little Che couldn't wait, grabbing a big chopstick of fatty beef, swirling it up and down in the red broth. then coating it in garlic sesame oil and stuffing it in his mouth. Sucking air at how scalding it was, but his face full of pure bliss. So good. So good. From under the table came a protest. Big Brains was pawing at my pant leg. He'd been fed so well he was overweight now. His coat so glossy it reflected the light. Laughing, I fished a big piece out of the pot. Boiled chicken breast. And put it in Big Brain's dedicated stainless steel bowl. The silly dog instantly buried his head in the bowl, chowing down with loud, happy slurps. Just as the whole family was warm and merry, passing cups back and forth, the tactical radar on the wall suddenly gave off a sound, an extremely faint beep. A few red dots of light were drifting into the 50-meter perimeter around our surface. Warning line. These were a few that had smelled the meat, or been drawn by the heat source. Low-tier ferals lured in. But I didn't even turn my head. Dad just kept unhurriedly swirling his duck intestine. Targets locked. Right after. Through the small monitoring window on the tactical screen, we could clearly see the surface footage. In the thick snow, heavy machine gun turrets disguised as chimneys silently extended, their barrels precisely locking onto several monsters from the outer line. Because silencers were fitted, only a few extremely muffled sounds came from the surface. In the monitor footage, the heads of those monsters, like ripe watermelons, burst apart in an instant. Black blood splattered across the snow. The corpses toppled stiffly and never moved again. Eat, eat. Never mind them. Mom added a big chopstick of tomato-stewed beef to my bowl. Beef boiled soft and tender. I gave Mom a happy smile. But all this peace is always shattered when you least expect it. On the radar screen, an extremely shrill alarm suddenly erupted, instantly drowning out the hot pots bubbling. Massive high-energy biological signatures detected, approaching rapidly. Warning, an abnormal convoy has appeared within radar scan range. Dad slammed down the beer can in his hand. The fatty beef in Little Che's mouth wasn't even swallowed yet. All four of us shot up from the dinner table at once, standing up, and rushed to the full-wall tactical radar screen. What's happening? Mom nervously wiped her hands. The radar map on the big screen was enough to make your scalp tingle right now. Where before there'd been only a few scattered red dots, the empty edge of the scan zone was now covered like a red tsunami. Densely packed, thousands of red dots of light were surging at a terrifying speed, straight toward the district where we were. And at the very front of that red tsunami were 3 green neutral dots, racing frantically down the highway. I immediately pulled up the surface perimeter, high-definition night vision of the district. In the monitor footage, in the storm-lashed dark night, 2 nearly shredded military heavy-armored off-road vehicles were escorting an extremely special one. A fully sealed transport, like an armored cash truck vehicle, struggling through streets full of abandoned cars. It's the regular army. The people in those vehicles are being hunted. Let me take a closer look. You could clearly see that overwhelming swarm of monsters. The horde wasn't just ordinary ferals. There were even several covered in black keratinized mutated flesh, howling madly at the rear. Ah. Damn, out of ammo. Just at the intersection less than 100 meters from our fortress's heavily armored perimeter, the last off-road vehicle covering the rear had its tire smashed by a monster that leapt up. The vehicle instantly lost control, slamming hard into a roadside utility pole, rolling half a turn before stopping. Captain, Vehicle 2 is totaled. Brothers, get out of there. Gunners, don't worry about us. Protect the target vehicle, go. The soldier trapped in the crushed cabin didn't hesitate. He ignited the last bundle of high-powered explosives on him. A massive fireball erupted in the middle of the monster horde, using his flesh and blood to buy the research vehicle ahead a final dozen seconds to breathe. The remaining off-road vehicle, and that heavy research vehicle, finally charged into the district where we were. A dead-end alley, towering rubble ahead. And right beside them, our 5-meter-tall, perimeter wall clad in diamond armor. They had nowhere left to run. A special forces captain, left arm crudely bandaged, carrying only what he had, kicked open the off-road door, holding an emptied rifle one-handed, and stood firmly before the research vehicle's door. The 4 remaining battered special forces soldiers stood back to back, with the research vehicle in the middle. Behind him, thousands of monsters were surging in like a black tide. In his eyes, little Che clenched his fists. Sis, are we going to help them? There are too many monsters. If we rashly open the door, we might well draw these beasts toward the fortress. Dad's brow furrowed tight. Reason was screaming warnings. Just then, from the speakers on the fortress perimeter, we suddenly caught that special forces captain's hoarse, frantic shout. He'd clearly noticed the automated weapons and hidden cameras operating on our fortress's outer wall. You up there? I know you can hear me. People inside, listen. I know you have a high-grade defense system. We're the Southern Theater Task Force. Captain Zhuang was slumped over the steering wheel of a 6-wheeler behind him. He drew the military knife from his thigh, steeling his nerves, facing the charging black horde. Whoever you are, I'm begging you, open the door. Even if you only let the research vehicle in. There's no time. This vehicle holds a spherical machine, a weather purification device. It can disperse the fog over a wide range and completely cut off the source of these monsters' evolution. As long as we can get these scientists and the spherical machine to a base 500 kilometers away, this apocalypse can be ended. Hearing weather purification device, Dad's eyes and mine both snapped. With a jolt, we'd long since discovered that the mutation of the monsters outside depended entirely on the ever-thickening fog in the air. If the fog never cleared, the monsters would only keep evolving endlessly. No matter how sturdy our fortress, sooner or later it would be worn down and destroyed. Cutting off the source of the monster's evolution wasn't just for all of humanity. It was also so we ourselves could live better. Going forward, do it. A flash of resolve crossed my eyes. I turned to look at my family. If we can directly drain these monsters' trump card, then this deal is a guaranteed win. Dad stared at that heavy research vehicle on the big screen, thought for only an instant, then nodded firmly. You're right. As long as we can truly solve this damned fog, taking this one risk is worth it. Open the door. These soldiers are good people. We can't just watch them die at our doorstep. Mom and little Che nodded in agreement without hesitation. With the whole family's full support, I had no more reservations. I shoved aside everything before me, my hands flying across the control panel. Main gate control released. Heavy isolation gateway fully opening. The outer inner panel, blocking in front of the Special Forces soldiers, the 5-meter-tall hydraulic diamond outer gate, suddenly gave off a heavy, drawn-out mechanical grinding sound. Under the Special Forces soldiers' stunned gazes, that indestructible fortress gate slowly retracted to both sides, revealing space inside large enough for 2 trucks to drive in side by side. An isolation zone. Wild joy burst into the captain's eyes. He instantly spun around and roared. The gates open, quick. Research vehicle, floor it and drive in. The hulking research vehicle and the remaining off-road vehicle roared deafeningly. Just as that overwhelming monster horde was less than 30 meters from the gate. Like lightning, they charged into our fortress's outer quarantine ring. The 2 diamond gates, at maximum speed, snapped shut in an instant, the very second after the gates fully closed. like a tsunami crashing against a reef. Countless monsters, shrieking madly, slammed hard into our 5-meter-tall outer armored wall, the entire massive underground mountain fortress. In that moment, gave off the most violent tremor since it was built. And my system panel instantly flashed a blinding red light in that moment too. Warning, massive scale disaster horde detected. Striking the fortress defense line. Triggering SSS tier defense mission. Guard the dawn of humanity. Mission requirement, under the endless assault of the city-breaking horde. Defend the fortress to the death, hold until the break of dawn. Countdown, 6 hours 30 minutes. Mission reward, unlock the plasma shield module. Activating the fortress's ultimate form. Looking at the screen full of blinding red warnings. My breathing was so rapid it felt like it might ignite. Inside the outer gate chamber, that Special Forces captain led the remaining 3 team members, guarding that heavy research vehicle firmly behind them. As the heavy airtight door opened, 3 figures, filthy from head to toe, staggered out of the vehicle, yet firmly guarding a silver device, the weather purification device prototype. They were scientists. Hurry, hurry, come in. Dad rushed forward. I steadied the most elderly professor with one hand. When we hauled this group, worn to their absolute limit, barely clinging to life by a thread, into the central living quarters. On the first level, the pounding outside had already dropped off at once. Thank you. Thank you. The captain held his gun one-handed. Even now, in the absolute safety of the interior, he still kept his tactical guard up. But looking at our fortress, packed with hardcore tech, yet warm as spring, this underground stronghold. A flash of awe crossed his eyes too. My name is Lei Hu. These are Academician Zhang's team. This prototype in their hands is the last hope for dispersing the fog. No matter what, we have to get them to the base. Stop talking. Come, let me dress those wounds. Mom moved briskly, pulling a huge pile of first aid gel and bandages from the medical cabinet, and started bandaging the wounded soldiers. I had no time for their pleasantries. My eyes locked hard on the tactical radar's big screen. On the screen, the whole city seemed to come alive. Those high-tier monsters lurking in the dark corners, as if summoned by some command. Like a thick, black tide, they were closing in on our fortress from every direction, sealing us in tight. On the 5-meter outer wall monitors, several layers of towering 4 to 5-meter creatures had appeared, bristling with vertical tentacles and bony spikes, giant stitched-together mutant beasts. The standard perimeter heavy machine gun turrets and railguns could never hold back an assault of this scale. Conventional firepower can't hold. We have to activate the fortress's trump card defense matrix. Level 3 energy core. 120% overclocked output. Twin-linked high-explosive howitzer module unlocked. Close-in metal storm matrix module engaged. Warning, forcing activation of heavy defense arrays will drain massive energy reserves. Proceed to bring all systems online? Command confirmed. Heavy firepower array, loading. As my command dropped, the surface erupted. With an ear-splitting mechanical grinding sound, the launch silos hidden underground snapped open. 2 automatic high-explosive howitzers, reeking of death, rose slowly into the night sky, and at the fortified corners, the automated close-in defense matrix turrets locked completely onto the black tide swarming below. Little Che, take the console's turret master control. Blast them to hell. Dad, take Captain Lei Hu and his men to the firing positions to help defend. I roared, turning my head. In that moment I became the master of the steel fortress. Got it. Little Che took over the system's heavy turret master interface, ready to make these monsters taste our caliber, enforcing justice, so to speak. The captain, gritting his teeth, led his 3 remaining Special Forces soldiers, and charged into the blast-proof firing bay with Dad. Even big brains didn't back down this time. Clad in body armor, like a true Siberian war wolf, he guarded the scientists and the machine fiercely. A vicious snarl rumbling in his throat. In those deep blue dog eyes, there was none of his usual goofiness left. Only pure ferocity remained. All units, open fire. As I slammed the red button on the master console, This brutal tower defense battle for humanity's fate truly began. The night was torn apart in an instant by blinding muzzle flashes. The two high-explosive howitzers let out an earth-shaking roar. Massive shells burst open at the heart of the black tide. In the spring-bright flames, countless severed limbs and stinking black blood were blown sky-high. Poo-pew-pew-pew. The automated close-in defense matrix turrets spat 2-meter tongues of flame. Thousands of armor-piercing rounds a minute wove into an airtight net of death. A wall of metal, those creatures trying to claw their way up the wall. Before this metal storm, were like meat fed into a grinder, shredded to pulp in an instant. Nice shot. On the left, that big one on the left is mine. His man raised the assault rifle from his thigh. Every single bullet clearly claimed one monster, but the monsters were simply too many. Second by second, the time ticked away. 3 hours later, the surface was piled with corpses like mountains. The reeking black blood had even flooded up to the base of our outer wall, spurred on by the red fog. Those high-tier armored mutant beasts began using the charging bodies as stepping stones, slamming madly against our walls. Crack. A gap has opened in the eastern firepower. They're climbing over. Two monsters covered in tumors and barbs cleared the 5-meter wall and leapt inside the fortress, frantically lunging for the ordinary civilians inside. My fingers hammered out a merciless command on the keyboard. Activate the fortress's internal high-voltage kill system. From the fortress ceiling, several rows of high-voltage lines dropped in an instant, with a deafening crackle. 20,000 volts instantly turned those two intruding high-tier monsters into blackened, foul-smelling charcoal. But outside, even more monsters had already scaled the corpse mountain up onto the wall. Our howitzer ammo stores were running dry. Even Lei Hu and his men had fired their last rounds. They could only draw their combat knives and hold the cover point. Wall armor integrity has dropped to 40%. Those 4-meter beasts are smashing the gate. The captain's voice, rare and grim. I looked up at the tactical display. 15 minutes left until dawn. But the defense line truly couldn't hold much longer. Each blow from those giant siege beasts sent dust raining down through the whole underground shelter. Lei Hu's men let out near-despairing roars. Hold. No matter what, you hold this line for me till dawn. Little Che, focus every last incendiary armor-piercing round, all on the front. Dad, abandon the perimeter and fall back to the inner cleanup gate. "14 minutes. 10 minutes. The 5-meter outer diamond gate, after enduring 6 full hours of relentless pounding, finally buckled under the strain. The largest armored behemoth smashed a terrifying crack into it. The monsters, through the crack, poured in like a raging black waterfall. The Special Forces team drew their final stand of glory, just as that giant armored behemoth sank its fanged jaws in a crushing bite onto our very last core barrier. In that instant, 198. 3, 2, 1. The countdown hit 0. As the clock struck 5:30 a.m., On the tactical radar screen, the timeline marking the night ran completely out. At the far edge of the horizon, a dazzling ray of sunlight swept across this hell on earth like a drawn sword. And at that very moment, in my mind, the long-awaited announcement rang out, dawn detected. SSS tier defense mission perfectly accomplished. Ultimate defense module. Plasma energy shield deployed. A high-frequency, resonant hum erupted from the core of our battered fortress. Bursting forth, the next second, a blindingly brilliant deep blue hemispherical energy shield, like a blue lotus, suddenly blooming amid the ruins, rose from the fortress's center. That armored behemoth, its jaws gaping wide, biting down on the inner gate. The instant it touched this thin blue film of energy, vaporized before our very eyes, leaving not a single drop of blood. It simply became a wisp of smoke drifting in the air. With a hiss, the deep blue plasma shield expanded rapidly, sweeping outward, until the entire district around our fortress was wrapped completely within it. Those monsters that had poured into the fortress, those clinging to the walls, the tens of thousands still charging from the rear. The moment the blue light touched them, they were all reduced to ash in an instant. The blinding blue light lit up the whole sky. As the blue light slowly steadied, settling into a faint, shimmering energy dome, the whole world fell silent. Within 30 meters of the fortress, nothing lived. Only black ash left by the vaporized remained. Testament to last night's savage battle. And 100 meters out, those monsters lucky enough to escape the energy shield's reach, they felt the warmth of the sun. And even more, they felt the sheer, crushing aura radiating from that fortress, wrapped in its blue shield. Whimper. A high-tier monster let out a terrified wail, and actually turned its body around, tail between its legs, fleeing for its life deep into the rear ruins. The remaining tide, like a receding ocean, under the newborn sunlight, abandoned their fallen kin all across the ground, and scattered in panic without a trace. The combat knife in Captain Lehu's hand clattered to the floor. This Iron Man, who danced on death's edge all night, watching the screen as sunlight poured over the land. His legs suddenly buckled, and he dropped to his knees, weeping aloud. Ahahaha. Dad patted his battered shoulder, his own eyes a little damp. Little Che just sprawled across the turret seat, gulping down huge breaths of air. Only big brains seemed to think all those monsters outside had been scared off by him alone. Smugly, he dropped his combat stance, growling and circling me, wagging his tail wildly for praise. I let out a long breath, feeling every bit of me go limp. But we won. Humanity's spark had been saved. Command. This is the Special Hazard Team. The landing corridor has been cleared. Please land immediately. Everyone stay on alert. Quick, board now. Protect the academician and the prototype. Before academician Zhang left, to the Lin family, the old man wept openly. Your family are saviors to all of humanity. Once the weather purification device runs successfully, the nation will never forget your service. Captain Lehu, along with all the surviving Special Forces soldiers, stood before the helicopter, and toward our family, toward this fortress that had stood unbroken, rendered a most solemn salute. The rotors kicked up a storm of dust and snow, and it slowly drifted away. Watching the helicopter shrink to a tiny black dot in the sky, I smiled and shook my head. Savior of humanity, that title's too heavy. It doesn't suit us. From the day the apocalypse began, my only goal was simply to keep my family alive and safe. Now that goal wasn't just met, it was exceeded. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. Over that year, the weather purification device academician Zhang's team brought back was a resounding success. Giant weather purification towers rose from the ruins of every major city. Deep blue columns of energy shooting into the sky, like so many drawn swords, cutting through the dark red fog that had shrouded the world for over a year, and scattering it completely. Once they lost the red moon fog, the source of their mutation, the berserkers' power plummeted. And they were wiped out one by one in humanity's heavy counterattack. The order of the world, upon the scarred, ravaged ruins, was being rebuilt, hard but steady. The news broadcast daily of new settlements rising here, of water grids restored there. As for our stronghold fortress, having completed the ultimate mission, it too had transformed. If anyone passed through this once suburban district, they'd surely be struck dumb with awe. A towering fortress over 20 meters high, built entirely of nanoalloy, piercing the sky, rising straight from the earth, around the fortress perimeter, that ring of all day, deep blue plasma shield, always active, had become the very definition of absolute safety in this region. Even the fortress's outer walls were covered in system-enhanced, faintly glowing green vines, giving this cold steel colossus a vivid, thriving life of its own. Mom, wearing a straw hat, a big pair of shears in hand, was happily weaving through the watermelon patch. Old Lin, build that frame a little higher. And then says this watermelon's a new seedless variety. We've got to give it plenty of sun. Got it, got it. Little Che, lend a hand. Dad, in a loose old undershirt, was building metal frames for the melon vines with little Che. As for me, lounging on an ergonomic chair at the garden's edge, a rubber frisbee in my hand, I flung it hard toward the distant lawn. Go get it, big brains. Big Brains shot off like a bolt of black and white lightning, kicking up a spray of turf as he tore across, snatching the frisbee clean out of midair. Then trotting back, tail wagging like crazy, burying his head into my chest, nuzzling wildly. Laughing, I ruffled his furry head, peeled a crystal-clear grape and popped it in my mouth. Juice bursting everywhere, sweet to the very core, remembering the terror when the apocalypse first broke a year ago. The screams beyond the soundproof walls, and all that blood and slaughter. It now felt like a distant dream, a whole world away. The world was clawing its way back to life atop the ruins, and under the shelter of the steel firmament. Our whole family, together and whole, not just a dog and a vegetable garden, but an endless supply of ice-cold soda too. No matter how the outside world changed beyond recognition, as long as family stayed by my side, the happy days that belonged to us would never, ever come to an end.